Last week when I sat down with Gareth Jones, we talked about what he wanted to automate next, and what he said was his car. And so I went out and I found one of these Anker Roav Bolt devices, and I've gone ahead, I've tested it a number of different ways, and today I'm going to share with you my story and my review of the Anker Roav Bolt. In order to even get this device in Canada, it was a bit of an issue for me. I mean, they're only selling this really in the US at this point, and so this has made it hard to acquire. Now, somebody did import it, and I'll tell you, they weren't too excited about how it was performing. So when I got to the actual place, what I instantly found out was that the person had an iPhone just like mine. It was actually the exact same model of iPhone, and that they were basically calling the Anker Roav Bolt connection and methodology they said it was in development.
So as I pick up the device, it's not going well right off the bat. He has to factory reset it. He struggles to factory reset it. I just say, you know what, man, don't worry about it. I'm going to take this thing. Just let me take it. And he hands me that and, this little cable here. He hands me, so you get a little auxiliary port, and that's why I can't show you a full unbox here of the device, but you get a little auxiliary cable, you get a pamphlet, which I don't have, and you get the device itself. So I take it back to my 2014 Mazda. It's a CX-9. Relatively high feature car at the time when it came out. I have good Bluetooth, or what used to be good Bluetooth, and I start the setup process with a factory reset, which is just a hard hold, or just a long hold rather, of the Google Assistant button that is actually physically on this device. So you can just hold it. And the other thing I do is I plug in my phone for charging, and these are relatively powerful charging ports here. So they were actually charging my phone quite quickly. Now there are two far field microphones here on board as well, and those are relatively good at hearing you versus most cell phones. So some positives kind of right off the bat. Now I get into the setup process, and I will say that I'm instantly impressed. What is this guy talking about? There's no problems here. There's no problems with the iPhone. He was telling me it was really a beta program for the iPhone. I'm thinking, no, he's just missed it here, and I've lucked out by getting this for $50 from him. So I'm going through the setup process, Bluetooth connection right into the phone, and then it basically asks me to identify my car's Bluetooth, and it makes the full connection process happen. And now what I have is basically my phone acting as an intermediary between the Roav Bolt here and my car's stereo, and I instantly have connection, and I'm able to start making commands. Now unfortunately, this is where problems start creeping up. I make a simple command like, what time is it? And I ask for the weather. Now, when I ask for the weather after I've asked one time for the time there, what happens is my Bluetooth no longer seems to handle the break of connection. So it made an initial connection, and then it kind of broke the connection in terms of audio coming out of my phone. And remember, this is just a 2014 car with a little bit of an older firmware on the Bluetooth, and so that's really starting to cause me issues because I'm only hearing some of the time. Now there's a nice little setting within the Google Assistant app for this accessory when you're connected that allows you to treat it like a phone call every time. So it brings it into your car stereo like it's a phone call from your phone, and that causes it to come in and out. But what I'll tell you is I'm still only getting about 50% of the messages out of the device through my Mazda here from 2014. And this continues, and I hit another struggle, which is a pretty easy struggle for you to handle, but I wouldn't really call this automation. Unless you're going on a long trip, I think this is going to frustrate you over time. You have to keep all of the different applications open that you want to use. So if you want to use Google Maps, well, you're going to need to keep that open. So you can start navigation and it'll work just fine once that's open. Same with Google Play Music or any music service that you have connected. That has to remain open on your phone, and then it can be utilized by the Google Assistant. And the Google Assistant app needs to remain on and running in the background as well. And, that starts to tweak me into, well, why aren't I using the Google Assistant application? More on that later. I can ask it to make phone calls. But then with an iPhone, not an Android, because I had brought an Android as well, the iPhone forces me to press the call button. Now, the same thing kind of happens with text messages, although it says it's sending the text message, never sends it. But I have to do the confirmation on screen to actually send that. That's just a limitation of iOS users. But you can start to hear how the experience on iOS, I was actually getting the right information from the individual I bought this from. He was really telling me, hey, it's not working so well. You're not going to love this situation. Now, what I can do without any interaction, I can check my calendar, I can check reminders, I can start my music, I can do all of those basic things that I think you'll want to do. I can also ask for search results and things like that. So there's a lot of good functionality I'm starting to get out of the device, but ultimately I'm having to interact with my phone a little more than I'd like to. So I get home with this 2014 Mazda and I go through the setup process, or I reset it up with another Android device, and I go through and I think, okay, well, I'm going to have a pretty different experience here. But all the while, as I was using it with the iPhone, I was finding that I still wasn't hearing the device every time. Sometimes there was a lag that caused me to actually miss the conversation or miss the next part where I was supposed to interact. So I could ask it to message someone, and then it would ask me, well, mobile, work, or whatever the different numbers were I had in the system. Sometimes the little bit of lag or delay in the system meant I missed it, and sometimes I didn't hear it come through my stereo. So starting to get a little bit frustrated with the device. So, I go through the Android setup process, I get that all done. It's working a little bit better because it can bring up the different applications natively, and things are working a little bit better, but I'm still having that variability with the vehicle. And so, well, it's time to switch the vehicle. So I head into my garage and I get into my relatively newer Armada here. We have a Nissan Armada, and that car connects up just fine. It does seem to struggle a little bit between the phone again and having this other Bluetooth connection live, but I eventually get it connected. There was some little fiddling going on there basically, but I do get it connected. I had to connect this secondarily to my phone, and that managed to keep everything kind of going. So then I go ahead and I utilize, but again, I'm struggling with the accuracy of this device. It's not responding every time I want it to, and I'm still not hearing it sometimes. The music situation is a little bit different. I can now control the music on my phone through the visual interface I have in the Armada, and that seems to decouple it from this device and actually getting the music to work through voice control or change songs, things like that. Other things from the music, and so the music doesn't actually go lower as my Google Maps are working. So I start to experience this other set of problems, but in general, it's a little bit better. Now, I was actually going to drop off my vehicle and pick this up. This is a 2019 Nissan Altima, actually. And so I have a third car I can go ahead and test it with. And that's where you're seeing lots of the shots here for setup and things. Now, as I go through resetting it up again, I don't factory reset this time, and I go ahead and I utilize my iPhone. I didn't even bring an Android in this case, because now it just works the same as an Android. I just have to keep those apps open. So I go ahead and I utilize it here, but what I find is just the placement of my 12-volt port that this plugs into causes this device to not hear very well in this car, which is a very quiet ride still. So I'm confused by that, and I'm finding again the Bluetooth connection, the initial setup of that Bluetooth was hard. Now, what does this all come to? I could talk to you about this for days and days and days, but what I've come to personally for myself is I've tried this in 3 different cars. I have really tried to make it work, but ultimately what I've come to is this is not ready for prime time. It's not ready for you. It's not ready for me. I will probably keep the device and play with it a little more, wait to see when it is ready. But what I come to, and I don't think this is necessarily Anker's fault. I don't think it's necessarily Google's fault. I think what is going on is there are so many situations that they've had to deal with here. Bluetooth setups in cars are very different, and they don't get updated like, over-the-air devices or devices that we can go and simply firmware by plugging in a USB cable. They're not getting those same updates. You have to usually take them to a dealership. In the case of my Mazda, I can't even get it updated, and there is no update. So they're dealing with this variability in the Bluetooth setup, and I think that's where I had the most issues with this device. Now, secondarily, I struggled sometimes just utilizing the device in terms of its own personal delay. So it goes and it makes the connection again, or I think it creates an active connection because it actually seems to sit in low energy Bluetooth. So it goes and it creates that active connection. There's a little bit of a delay after I've used the wake word, and then sometimes I miss my opportunity to actually give it the next command. So it becomes an awkward situation, and I struggle with utilizing the device. And again, that rate of it actually working actually seems to not matter what car I'm in. It's about 50% of the time that I get a response out of the device. So I can ask it for something and sometimes it'll just turn off. Sometimes it'll respond and I won't hear it. Sometimes it'll respond and I'll hear it, but that, again, I would say it's about 50% of the time. So this device is not worth prime time. It's not worth your time, and you're probably going to be a very specific person that is going to find a good use for this. What I will say, these are the people who maybe want to look at this device. If you have an older car with an aux port, and also if you have an FM transmitter, you'd like to look at that situation. Tech with Brett set his up this way, and he didn't have Bluetooth in his car, he didn't have an aux port, so he used an FM transmitter. But I think this would work with an aux port just as well. In a lot of cases, you'd be able to switch back and forth between the aux port radio if you wanted to listen to that. It'd be much quicker switching than Bluetooth. You wouldn't have to sit in silence if you weren't playing any music through your phone, which uses data plans, which is not okay in some countries. The real setup, I think, is when you plug this in or put it on an FM transmitter and then you pipe that through. I think that's going to be the most reliable and best way to utilize this device. And so again, I think this is probably older cars, because other people, you already have Android Auto, or you already have an Android device with the new driving mode. This is a really, really small market. So, guys, if you're wondering whether or not I think this would work in your situation, go ahead, leave that down in the comments below. Otherwise, go ahead and check out some of our other reviews here on Automate Your Life. That playlist is up now. And otherwise, guys, don't hate, automate.